You're watching News Channel 3, Mason City, Albert Lee, Austin, Rochester. From the News Channel 3 team, news with Jodi Huisentruit and weather with Don Harmon. This is News Channel 3's Midday.
Before sunrise, on a mild summer morning, in June 1995, a 27-year-old television news anchor named Jodi Huisentruit hurriedly left her apartment in Mason City, Iowa, headed for work. But she never arrived, and her disappearance has never been solved. In 2003, two television news reporters created FindJodi.com, a website dedicated to preserving Jodi's memory and keeping her case alive. This is the official Find Jodi podcast. There seems to be an element of stalking in Jodi's case, which begs the question we'll ask on this episode. Was Jodi abducted by a stalker when she disappeared from her apartment complex on June 27, 1995? Jodi was a popular television news anchor. She was well-liked. In her 18 months or so behind the desk at KIMT, she had developed a connection with the audience on her daybreak morning news program.
Yes, I have an idea.
It'll scare you. Some of them won't scare you, I hope, if you stay tuned to another half hour of Daybreak. That up next.
Jodi and her co-anchor had developed great on-camera chemistry, and Jodi finally had found her niche in the business. When her career began, Jodi's presentation was a little more rough around the edges, and she paid her dues on the way up. In Alexandria, Minnesota, and Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where the big story is often a local school board meeting or the spring planting conditions, Jodi's assignments were far from glorious. But within a few short years, with her persistence, she had improved her delivery and information-gathering skills, and at KIMT she had found her niche. In Mason City, she was truly honing her skills as an anchor. And involved with her job as an anchor was making a connection with the audience. And that skill is harder to hone. It can be more inherent than learned. It's more of an innate quality that most often you either have it or you don't, and it's a big part of the job. Aside from the information, news, weather, sports that your local newscast provides, the audience makes its decision on which local channel to watch in part based on the anchors themselves and the persona that they give off through the screen on camera. That connection with the audience is one of the traits that professional broadcasters rely on. And Jodi's on-camera persona was warm and inviting. It was approachable and unassuming. It suited well with the small-town Midwestern feel of Mason City, and Jodi was quickly welcomed into the community. That connection that Jodi developed on television has two edges to it, though. Maybe 99% of the audience experiences that connection in a healthy and positive way, but to the relatively few of those watching who might be unbalanced in some way, that connection can manifest itself differently and dangerously. Although men in the industry sometimes see it as well, women who are on camera tend to experience these disturbing realities most often through harassing messages, letters, emails, and sometimes worse. And especially anchors, like Jodi was. Sometimes during transitions in a newscast, personal anecdotes will come through on air. It's part of building that connection with the community as a likable, down-to-earth person who lives here too. And Jodi would offer these bits of her real life up to the audience every day. These are the things the audience might have in common with Jodi or find appealing about Jodi. But to the very small but inevitable portion of the audience that would have experienced their connection with Jodi in an unhealthy way, these insights into Jodi's life can become ammunition against her own safety. A person who wanted to experience a deepening connection with Jodi in real life would only need to watch her newscast to get to know about her local interests, the places she liked to frequent.
This morning, like every morning, we have a coffee cup salute. There you can see it on the screen. This morning, the featured mug in our Daybreak Coffee Club comes from the Perkins Family Restaurant. It's a familiar place to all of us.
Sure,
I recently actually brought Don in a treat from Perkins, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
2 cookies.
They're very good.
Amy Coons, I think, enjoyed it more than you did, but it was a nice treat.
Big cookie fan.
If you'd happen to like to drop off a mug, please do.
Her friends.
Yeah, kind of a happy thought. Your best friend may be the person who tells you bluntly what is wrong with you. And Don, the reason that's happy is because if they're honest with you, maybe you'll make a positive change, right?
You bet. Well, a little corrective criticism and best friends are good for that kind
I've
of
got
stuff.
a buddy in Mississippi who doesn't hide anything. She tells me exactly if my white shoes are dirty, whatever. She just lays it on the line.
I don't know that I'd really worry about my white shoes being dirty. I don't think that's a
this
big
gal
deal.
does.
Okay.
It's a crazy situation. Who knows? But she's my buddy.
Well, that's good.
That buddy of Jodi's was the friend she called the night before she disappeared, by the way. And then there were the public station events Jodi would attend.
Going to be at the Elma Public Schools at 1:30. I believe it helps out the Boy Scouts, if I'm not mistaken.
And everybody from KMT has signed us great basketball, and we'll be giving that away, I'm sure.
I believe Jodi Huisentruit is on there.
Yes, and Big Don Harmon.
Big Don Harmon. I think Big Don, yeah, there's Big Donnie H right there.
Anyway, we're all looking forward to taking part in that Sunday. Hopefully most of us can make it there.
I think we
Hopefully
should.
you can too.
As long as I make it. I'm the big scorer, you know.
Big airball king himself.
3-point Harmon.
You are. Okay, thank you, Don.
And there's the gifts that were sent from viewers.
Don and I got a special treat in the mail yesterday. A couple presents from Bob from Clemmy, Iowa. He does leather work, so he decided we needed coffee mug coasters to be part of our mug club, and that we do. So we do thank you, Bob, for the coasters, Don.
Hey, we certainly do. Bob, these are great.
Additionally, Jodi's real name, phone number, address, and even her apartment unit number appeared in the public Mason City phone book in 1994 and 1995. Keeping tabs on Jodi would not have been very difficult. And there is some indication that Jodi had a stalker around the time she disappeared. FindJodi team member Caroline Lowe joins us now. With 40 years of investigative TV reporting experience at WCCO-TV in Minneapolis and other stations around the country. About 9 months before Jodi disappeared in October 1994, Jodi was alarmed enough by a small white truck following her while she was out one evening that she called police.
Very little information in the report, but it says that Huisentruit requested to talk to an officer in reference to a subject who was following her driving a small white pickup truck. So we have this incident in which Jodi was bothered enough, spooked enough to make a police report. Mind you, this is someone on television who's used to being looked at, stared at. So she made a police report back then. The person who took that report was Lieutenant Ron Vanderweerd, who later became a supervisor of the abduction investigation, and he said that he basically gave her some safety tips, and that seemed to be it. In talking to Jodi's family and some of her friends, they said she was pretty shook up. She was pretty shaken up about what happened.
Whether because of that incident with a white truck or something else, Jodi had taken steps to try to ensure that she was less vulnerable in the months leading up to her disappearance, including enrolling in a self-defense class only 2 months before she disappeared. Caroline Lowe interviewed Jodi's instructors.
Jodi went there on a Saturday. She was late for a self-defense workshop, and they said she was very upset at the time. She felt bad that she had missed it, so they gave her her own course. And during the time she was there, this is 2 months before Jodi was abducted, Julie said that Jodi told her she felt someone had been following her. She didn't give any specifics, and it didn't seem to be in connection with that day. She just felt that somebody had been following her, and she wanted to take some self-defense classes to protect herself. After Jodi disappeared, her friend of hers down in Mississippi received a letter telling her about the self-defense classes and encouraging her to be aware. She said, you can't protect yourself too much. So we heard from several different directions as recently as right around the time Jodi disappeared, as well as in March, that Jodi was telling some people, that she felt she was being followed.
Listening to Caroline's account of speaking to different people independently who say that Jodi was worried someone might have been following her gives me chills now. Was this Jodi asking for help from others without wanting to appear too paranoid or hysterical? She's acting as though she feels at least a little vulnerable for whatever reason.
I think that's what really struck me when I talked with the self-defense people who trained her in March. I mean, this is, 6 months or more since the incident in October, so there's not a proximity to that event. So what else is happening? Is she just more aware of things? Is what's going on that's making her uncomfortable? Again, this is March, 2 months before Jodi was abducted.
And the phone calls. Let's talk about that.
Well, one of the things that really surprised us that we learned just a few years ago, interviewing two of Jodi's golf partners. She was part of a 4-member golf team at the Mason City Country Club. Actual golf was actually at the Highland Park golf course. And she talked about getting together with one of the people in the near future for dinner, somebody she'd run into before, local businessman. And Jodi, according to these two people who were at the table, who were having dinner with her, Jodi said she'd been receiving some sort of nasty phone calls, nuisance calls. Didn't seem overly concerned, but did indicate that she planned to change her phone number the next day. And as you know, her phone, her address, her phone was all listed at the time in the very public Mason City phone directory. So something was going on at that time. We had not heard about that until about 3 years ago, but the people I interviewed said they were extensively interviewed by police and the FBI right after Jodi was abducted, and that they'd shared that information back then. So that's part of what's created us some confusion at times when we read that police have said that police don't feel there's a stalker. In fact, one interview said there was no gifts, there were no phone calls. Well, according to these two people who preferred to remain anonymous for safety concerns, Jodi told them hours before she disappeared that she had some concerns about these annoying phone calls and that she planned to change her phone number the next day.
In 2011, Jodi's case was featured on HLN, 15 and a half years after Jodi's abduction in 1995. From the Mason City Police Department, Lieutenant Frank Stearns, who has since retired, appeared on that broadcast, which was a round-robin sort of show. The anchor would moderate a conversation between 5 or 6 guests. FindJodi co-founder Josh Benson was one of the other guests. But this exchange you're about to hear begins with Mark Klass, who is also a guest on that show. He's the father of Polly Klass, the 12-year-old girl who was abducted from her bedroom and murdered in 1993. Following the murder, Mark became a child victims advocate and founded the Klass Kids Foundation, and it's in this role he appears on the HLN special. Mason City police have been relatively tight-lipped about their interpretation of Jodi's case, at least officially. But appearing live on national TV in 2011, Lieutenant Frank Stearns seemed to offer some of his thinking, at least into whether or not Jodi might have been abducted by an obsessed fan. Again, Mark Klass begins the exchange.
I mean, she represents the worst fears of everybody in public life, that perhaps there is some twisted fan lurking beneath the radar, or perhaps even behind the dumpster, waiting for an opportunity to grab his obsession and make her his own. And I think that that's a very real possibility here, although she did not reference anything like that in her journal, but she also had no special security. She was a famous person, but she was a big fish in a small market, so she didn't have any extra security around her and really was very vulnerable and very much on her own early in the morning.
Isn't that the truth? 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's not only a TV news anchor. It can be somebody that's going to the local restaurant when they open up, or somebody that's going to the hospital with the early morning shift. Lieutenant Frank Stearns joining us from Mason City, Iowa. What do you believe the working theory of the case is? Do you think it was an obsessed fan, someone that knew where she lived and waited and knew she was alone? Or do you think it was someone that she knew in her personal life?
Well, obviously, we're not going to get tunnel vision. We're going to keep an open mind to anything. Would an obsessive fan, would they wait around an extra hour hiding behind a garbage dumpster and possibly being seen? I don't feel they would. It was merely 12 steps from her apartment door to her car door. I mean, we're talking seconds, and she would have been in the safety of her own car. So it wasn't a stranger that just drove by and seen her walking through the parking lot. But I can't rule that out either. We've got nothing showing that there was a stalker. No gifts, no cards, no phone calls. Other than one instance that she reported a truck was following her, that we checked up and followed up on. Nothing else other than that. So
was that a truck or was that a van that was following her?
That was a small pickup truck.
It seems clear from these comments that the investigators in Jodi's case had come to a conclusion by 2010 or 2011 that she personally knew the person or persons who took her. And that certainly could be true. Lieutenant Stern speculates it's unlikely that an obsessive fan would wait around for Jodi for an extra hour, quote, hiding behind a garbage dumpster and possibly being seen, unquote. But then again, someone did. What does the fact that Jodi was about an hour late that day and that her abductor would have had to have waited have to do with that person's relationship to her? In other words, why do police seem to think it's more likely that someone Jodi knew would wait to confront her or abduct her as opposed to a stranger? But on this statement that Lieutenant Stearns makes, almost everyone can agree, quote, it wasn't a stranger who just drove by and saw her walking through the parking lot, unquote. But as for any element of stalking being ruled out in Jodi's case just because she was running late for work that day, in fact, the opposite seems like it could be true. Had Jodi been on schedule that morning, we wouldn't have a valuable piece of information, and that's this. Whoever took Jodi was willing, for whatever reasons, to take the risks involved in abducting her there and waiting the extra hour to do so. As FindJodi co-founder Gary Peterson wrote in 2014, what was so important about this morning? Why did the abduction have to be accomplished on that day? It's a very simple but powerful observation. Why there? Why then? None of this to say police never considered stalking in Jodi's case, far from it. As her friends and family would tell television news reporters at the time,
with all the times I've talked to detectives, they feel that someone stalked her, watched her, knew what her schedule was, and was definitely going to plan on doing something that morning.
Which is not to say necessarily that Jodi was stalked by a stranger. Of course, she could well have been stalked by someone she already knew. Jodi's good friend, Ani Cruz, in the months after Jodi vanished.
I do think it was somebody that watched her, and I don't know if it was somebody who flicked on the TV and watched her. I don't think that. I think it was somebody who actually knows, somebody that waited for her.
Coming up next, Caroline and I discuss the various aspects of Jodi's potential stalking and what the parking lot of her apartment complex can tell us about whether or not a stalker might have been responsible for Jodi's disappearance 25 and a half years ago.
I think if you take a look at the scene and talking to investigators, you know that the window, the time to take Jodi was 12 seconds. She was just steps away from her building. So it just seems almost physically impossible that somebody could have just been driving by Kentucky Avenue, just driving through the parking lot in time to jump out and grab Jodi. So it clearly points to some kind of stalking, whether it's a stalking and planning, if you will, by somebody who knew her, or if it's somebody who, perhaps a viewer or somebody else who had been watching her. There's no other scenario than imagining some form of stalking, some kind of surveillance had to have been going on to be able to execute the crime under those circumstances.
And add the fact, obviously, she was late for work, so theoretically, someone's not only waiting, but they're waiting an extra 45 to 60 minutes for her to finally come out.
Right. And it's hard to know what that means. Is it somebody who knows she's been late before? Is it somebody who just figures they're going to wait it out? They know that she's due to be on the news that day. Hard to say, but clearly from looking at the scene, somebody was waiting for Jodi.
From that apartment complex, you've talked to a couple, 2 to 3 independent people who have mentioned or who have seen or specifically remember items in the complex, in the parking lot area, beer cans.
We've talked with 3 people who have mentioned seeing beer cans. 2 of them were in the parking lot, and the other one was behind Building B. What stood out is they remember seeing these beer cans lined up before Jodi disappeared and no longer there after Jodi disappeared, raising the question, was somebody sitting there watching Jodi? As we've talked about before, Jodi's apartment was very visible to the parking lot. People I've talked with said they've seen her in her apartment, especially when the lights are on. They've seen her working out. She would have been very easy to watch from down below. In addition to the references to the empty beer cans being seen, we also heard from somebody who said she remembers in the days leading up to Jodi's disappearance, a gray car parked behind Building B back by the campgrounds that are behind the complex, and something where there was somebody sitting there, didn't get a description, but somebody in a gray car The woman who told me this said she mentioned this to police after she was interviewed right after Jodi disappeared. She said they didn't seem to pay a lot of attention, but to this day, she said, I wonder if it has anything to do with Jodi's abduction. I just wonder. Now, it's also possible that things like whoever might have been hanging out drinking in the parking lot, who might have been hanging out in the car behind, they weren't going to stick around after suddenly there's this huge police presence. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine them hanging out there if the police are there. So whether there's a connection or it's coincidence, we don't know, but it's among sort of the troubling things that raise questions. Was there somebody there who'd been actively stalking Jodi in the days leading up to her abduction?
I think what stuck out to me about your reporting about the beer cans is it's such a specific thing for people to remember. And also the fact that you got it from 2, now 3 people who at least remember cans in different parts of the complex, but 2 people who, independent of one another, remember all these years later seeing those beer cans before Jodi goes missing and they're gone. It just seems like such an odd thing to remember, but here you have 2 people, 3 people who remember seeing beer cans in the area.
That has very much stayed with me and think, what does it mean? Does it mean anything? Is there a connection? Interviewing people 20, 25 years later, these are things that they remember as well that stayed with them. There are other things they've shared, but there is something about that pattern that concerned them. And knowing, again, as we said, Jodi would have been very easy to watch. People who I've talked with said they saw her getting ready some mornings to go to work if they happen to be working. It's actually kind of heartbreaking to look at all this and see just how easy it would have been for almost anybody to abduct Jodi.
With so many people living in such a small area, no one witnessed the crime. Some people may or may not have heard the scuffle when she was abducted. It's like nobody knows anything right there at that crowded apartment complex.
It's particularly hard to imagine on a summer night, early in the morning. The windows are open in some cases. How could there be nobody that heard or saw anything, to think not one witness? And just the fearlessness to grab her in that situation, because how could that person who took Jodi not expect somebody possibly to be looking out a window? This wasn't back in the woods somewhere down a hill. This was in a parking lot that was visible, windows facing the parking lot in 3 separate buildings. I can't think of a case of mystery like this that has as many strange factors, as few witnesses, anything. It's
and
just
from that scene, there is no good place, really great place, to do the stalking if you're waiting for a couple of nights before, however frequently, let's say there's a stalker watching her apartment, watching her routine for a period of time. Nobody reports seeing that either. And I've been there at the exact same time in the morning when Jodi was taken. And even at 4 in the morning on a weekday, there are people out and about. So even at 4 o'clock in the morning, people are coming back from a shift or going to a shift. You're taking a huge risk, and if there was stalking involved, nobody talks about seeing a creepy vehicle, a creepy guy, or calling the police because of this strange car that's been in the area for a couple of nights. Nothing like that. It's I'll mind my own business and look down and just kind of ignore everything else around me, it seems like.
And it might go to just what the sense of safety was back then. Maybe it just didn't stand out. Maybe it's the anonymity that some people have in apartment complexes of not paying attention to what other people are doing. I wouldn't rule out that whoever was waiting for Jodi might have been in a car. Could this person have been waiting in a car, truck, a van, if you will, close enough to Jodi to get out in time to grab her and allow that person to take off with her? But it's such a tiny window.
And we've talked about she's in the phone book, her phone number, her street address, her apartment unit number is in the phone book. To you, working in the profession, being a female in the profession, and Jodi would receive, she was the on-camera anchor, a lot of personality coming through, a lot of camera time. People would send her gifts. I'm sure she got correspondence at the television station. 99% of it's going to be innocence and fan mail. That connection that you have with the audience that gets you the ratings, gets people coming back to view every morning, can be misinterpreted by a different sort of mind.
And one of the things you and I have talked about, and Jodi shared so much on TV. She shared so much about what she was going to do, what her plans were that day, and which is not unusual. Like I may say, well, this afternoon I'll be going to the golf tournament, or I won't be sticking around to do the noon newscast because I'm going to be a part of this fundraiser. those things were such a part of how Jodi interacted with her viewers and how anchors continue to interact and put things on, like my son just got into this college, or my daughter, her high school pictures graduating from prom. There's still a lot of that, and it sometimes makes me cringe because I feel like it does make it so easy for somebody who doesn't just want to connect with you as a reporter or anchor, but who has a violence on their mind.
And she, in that morning show specifically, it was kind of zany and wacky and fun, and it provided a lot of opportunity for her to remark about her past, about her interests, about where she went to dinner, about that she took a walk in the morning. And if you're watching with Twisted Intent, it would not be hard to collect those items to come up with a picture, a routine of Jodi's day, especially when she's in the phone book and it's not hard to find her.
And where she would hang out socially. One of the things, one person I talked with recently, I've heard this before, said we knew that there's a place in town, the Southbridge Lounge, that was kind of known as a KIMT hangout place, where this person said she saw Jodi from time to time. I've heard that from others, and there are other places as well, the OP bar in town. So people can pretty much, if they are interested in seeing Jodi, even if they're just curious, it would not be hard to figure out that if you go a few times a week, you might just run into her. You might see her at the grocery store. Her schedule, it was set. Unlike some reporters, her schedule was clearly, she was on the news at 6. She was on the news at noon, basically done by 12:30 in the afternoon. It would not be hard to check out the local Perkins where Jodi ate regularly. Check out any number of places if you wanted to get to know Jodi, if you wanted to figure out where she was.
So can we draw any conclusions about whether or not Jodi was stalked prior to her abduction?
I think we have enough information from the police incident report that we received a few months ago that's documented. We have enough from her friends. We have comments from the safety instructors that there were things going on, whether these were just occasional incidents, whether that truck incident in October of 1994 made her even more on edge, made her think that there was somebody out there. Even if all that had been going on, we don't know if that's the person who actually took her. So we realize there could be some parallel events. We could have a stalker, but was it a stalker, that stalker who necessarily was a person who took Jodi that morning of June 27th, 1995?
There are several possibilities here generally. Jodi may have had a stalker, or more than one stalker, during her 18 months in Mason City, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Jodi's stalker became Jodi's abductor. Then again, obviously, he could have. Taken all together, there's an interesting possible picture that comes into shape about the possibility that Jodi Huisentruit was being stalked in the months before she disappeared. The truck she complained to the police about following her, the comments she made to her self-defense instructor and her friends about a concern for her personal safety and the possibility that she thought somebody was following her in the months before she vanished. Then there are the harassing phone calls she complained about hours before she disappeared, and the beer cans and the gray vehicle. People in the apartment complex remember seeing them before Jodi disappeared, but they were gone after. Was Jodi being stalked? Did the stalking have anything to do with her disappearance? We won't be able to find those definitive answers in this episode, but the team realized, in putting together this show, that we should ask a question of you. If you lived in Mason City in the 90s, were you followed by a white truck? Were you followed by any other vehicle? Does any part of Jodi's story feel familiar to you? Or does it sound familiar from something that someone has shared with you over the years? If it does, even if you think it's nothing, the team would love to hear from you. You can contact us through FindJodi.com, and you can remain anonymous if you like. And we also encourage anyone with information about Jodi's abduction in 1995 to contact the Mason City Police Department. They have been the primary law enforcement agency investigating Jodi's case, as well as the Iowa DCI, or Department of Criminal Investigation, and the FBI. FindJodi is a not-for-profit team that exists to basically keep Jodi's case alive and educate the public about Jodi's case, as well as other missing persons. FindJodi Incorporated operates strictly on the team's personal funding and donations, and so all donations are extremely appreciated. And thank you for subscribing to this podcast. Moving forward, we'll be releasing a new episode on alternating Thursdays. Please share the link with anyone you know who might be interested in Jodi's case. And a great way to share the podcast to the audience at large is by leaving a positive 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you for helping us share Jodi's case and keeping it alive. And let's hope that 2021 is the year that we all get some answers. For the entire FindJodi team, I'm Scott Fuller. We'll talk to you again on Thursday, March 4th, for a new episode. Thank you for listening.